Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, June 12th, 2018. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam President. President Breed.
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Cohen. Present. Cohen present. Supervisor Fewer. Present. Fewer present. Supervisor Kim. Here. Kim present. Supervisor Peskin. Present. Peskin present. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan not present. Supervisor Safai. Safai present. Supervisor Sheehy. Sheehy not present. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie present. Supervisor Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Yee. Yee not present. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any communications?
There are none to report, Madam President.
Okay, colleagues, today we are approving the meeting minutes from May 8th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Moved by Supervisor Peskin, seconded by Supervisor Safai. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will be approved after public comment. All right, Madam Clerk, please call items 1 through 6 together.
Items 1 through 6 are revenue bond and appropriation ordinances. Item 1 is an ordinance to authorize the issuance and sale of tax-exempt or taxable power revenue bonds by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, or PUC, in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed approximately $155 million to finance the costs of various capital projects benefiting the power enterprise and requires 9 votes to approve, Madam President. Item 2 is an ordinance to authorize the issuance and sale of tax-exempt or taxable water revenue bonds by the PUC for an aggregate principal amount not to exceed approximately $478 million to finance the costs of various capital water projects benefiting the water enterprise. Item 3 is an ordinance to appropriate $1.2 billion of proceeds from revenue bonds, state loan funds, or state grant funds, wastewater revenue, and capacity fees for PUC's wastewater enterprise capital improvement program for fiscal years 2018 and 2019 at approximately $707 million, for fiscal years 2019 through 2020 at approximately $511 million, and placing approximately $987 million on Controller's Reserve. Item 4 is an ordinance to authorize the issuance and sale of tax-exempt or taxable wastewater revenue bonds for an aggregate principal amount not to exceed approximately $987 million to finance the costs of various capital wastewater projects benefiting the wastewater enterprise. This ordinance requires 8 votes to approve. And item 5 and 6 are appropriation ordinances, with item 5 appropriating a total of approximately $340 million of Hetch-Hetchy revenue, cap and trade revenues, and power and water revenue bonds for the PUC Hetch-Hetchy Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 2018 through 19 at approximately $141 million, and for fiscal years 2019 through 20 for $200 million, and placing approximately $155 million of power bonds, $102 million of water bonds on Controller's Reserve. And item 6 appropriates a total of approximately $483 million of proceeds from revenue bonds, state loan funds, or state grant funds, water revenues, and water capacity fees for the PUC's Water Enterprise Capital Improvement Program from fiscal years 2018 through 19 at $276 million, and for fiscal years 2019 through 20, $207 million, and reappropriating water capital bond appropriations of approximately $16 million in fiscal years 2018 through 19, and placing approximately $376 million of revenue bond and state loan funds or state grant funds proceeds by project on Controller's Reserve.
All right, seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk, on items 1 through 6, please call the roll.
Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan.
Aye.
Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Sheehy?
Aye.
Sheehy, aye. Supervisor Stephanie? Stephanie, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those items are adopted unanimously. Number 7, Madam Clerk, please.
Item 7 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to increase the transportation sustainability fee from $5 to approximately $24 for non-residential projects larger than 99,999 gross square feet, except in the central south of Market area plan area, where the fee for such projects would be increased by $2 to approximately 21.04 cents, and to affirm the CEQA determination and to make the appropriate findings.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same House, same call? Without objection, the ordinance is finally passed unanimously. Next item.
Item 8 is a resolution to determine and declare that the public interest and necessity demand the construction, reconstruction, acquisition, improvement, demolition, seismic strengthening, and repair of the Embarcadero seawall and other critical infrastructure, and the payment of related costs necessary or convenient, and finding that the estimated cost of $425 million will need to be incurred through bonded indebtedness.
Madam Clerk, please call items 9 and 10 as well.
Item 9, resolution to amend the city's 10-year capital expenditure plan for fiscal years 2018 through 2027 to increase the proposed seawall bond from $350 million to $425 million to fund Phase 1 of the seawall program. And item 10 is an ordinance to call and provide for a special election to be held in the city on Tuesday, November 6th, 2018, for the purpose of submitting to the San Francisco voters a proposition to incur the following bonded debt of the city and county of approximately $425 million to finance the construction of the Embarcadero seawall and other critical infrastructure and related costs necessary or convenient, and to affirm the CEQA determination and to make the appropriate findings.
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President, and I want to thank all of the many co-sponsors, Supervisors Breed, Cohen, Kim, Sheehy, and Yee, as well as Mayor Lee, Mayor Breed, and then Mayor Farrell for their support for this critical infrastructure bond. You should have all received a red-lined copy from Brad Benson at the port last week, but just in case, I've distributed copies to all of you today. And I want to thank the port for working with Sonny Angulo in my office to identify some language that I believe will serve to help us pass this measure in November by codifying the city's commitment to provide seismic upgrades to the seawall while preserving the historic assets in the Embarcadero Historic District, which is a federally designated historic district, as well as mitigating construction and traffic impacts to the downtown to the fullest extent possible during what is sure to be a disruptive infrastructure project. The port has been doing, I think, really extraordinary work under the leadership of our port director, Elaine Forbes, as well as the executive steering committee assembled to guide the long-term seawall program, which, as you all know, protects over $100 billion of critical citywide serving utilities and infrastructure from our rising bay. Out of the various near-term scenarios that continue to be refined and analyzed, I wanted the voters to know that the city and the port will be good stewards of the public's funding and select the most financially feasible and least disruptive path forward. Ultimately, this is a small piece of the overall need that we're going to have over the next several decades, and we need to show the voters that if we're going to continue to come back to them with financing requests, that we're going to move forward rehabbing the seawall in a way that protects our historic resources with surgical precision. And finally, I wanted to announce and celebrate the fact that the port was just selected as part of as one of 6 national finalists to receive a coveted federal New Start grant today, one that hopefully will open the door to millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in future federal funding down the line. And I want to thank the team at the port for shepherding this critical project and ask that we adopt these amendments and then continue them to a committee of the whole next Tuesday, June the 19th.
Supervisor Peskin has made a motion for item number 10. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Safai.
I just wanted to have my name added as a sponsor.
Thank you, Supervisor Safai. And colleagues, on item number 8, and 9, can we take that same House, same call? Without objection, those resolutions are adopted unanimously. And on the amendment for item number 10, to make amendments and to send it to the board next week as a committee of the whole, can we take that without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. And the ordinance as amended, can we take, oh, we can't take that. So we're going to hear this next week as a committee of the whole at the Board of Supervisors. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin, for making the amendments to include those specific findings and more outreach in the neighboring areas that are going to be impacted. With that, Madam Clerk, let's go to item number 11.
Item 11 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to reauthorize provisions that support the development of new production, distribution, and repair, known as PDR, space in specified PDR zoning districts, to affirm the CEQA determination and to make the appropriate findings.
Colleagues, can we take item number 11, same House, same call? Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. All right, Madam Clerk, let's go to roll call for introductions, and then we will interrupt that at 2:30 for our commendations at that time.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Tang, first up to introduce new business.
Submit.
Thank you. Supervisor Yee.
Submit.
Thank you. President Breed.
Submit.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Just one moment, please.
Supervisor Cohen, we can come back to you after the next person.
Thank you. Please re-refer. Thank you.
Supervisor Fewer.
Submit, please.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Kim. Okay, thank you. Supervisor Peskin.
Okay, I'll submit.
Supervisor Ronan. Okay, thank you. Supervisor Safai.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, President Breed, everyone here today. We held a hearing a couple of weeks ago on the city's goals for zero waste. And about over a decade ago, the idea was that San Francisco would achieve zero waste by 2020. It came out a few months ago from the Department of Environment and Ecology that that is no longer attainable. Although San Francisco is a leader in the entire United States and the world in waste diversion, we still are not achieving that goal, and we will not achieve that goal by 2020. That has a price to consumers, it has a price to ratepayers, it has a price to our environment. And so we held that hearing in Public Services, Neighborhood Safety with Chair Ronan, Chair Sheehy, and Supervisor Ronan and others. And the conversation revolved around one of the biggest points that came out was that 60% of what we put in our waste stream is still compostable and recyclable. Let me say that again. 60% of what we put in our trash. A lot of that is really about people just not wanting to put trash in the right spot. Over a decade ago, we came up with mandatory recycling and composting. We went from one stream of waste to 3 streams of waste. Many of you know our janitors in this building now are dealing with not just the black bin, but they're dealing with the green and the blue bin. And that's how we think about it in San Francisco. Many of us do our own sorting and sorting in our homes. But in our buildings and our largest producers, it came out, it was very, very clear that some of the biggest producers of trash are our office buildings and our large apartment buildings. The legislation that I'm introducing today is essentially an update of something that I worked on over a decade ago with our janitors union. And it said that if a large producer of waste, a large building, a large apartment building, a large entity is producing waste that is not meeting our citywide diversion rate, then they would automatically be required to have on-site sorting. And we would be doing the best place to do waste diversion and sorting is on-site and where it's produced, like we do in our homes individually and the janitors do in their buildings. But here we are a decade later and still 60% of what we are putting in the trash is compostable or recyclable. They did surveys. They asked people and they said, Do you believe in recycling? Yes. Do you believe in composting? Yes. Do you believe it's a good policy? Yes. Do you participate fully? No. And so a lot of it is really about people just not wanting to go through the extra work of actually participating. So this legislation today says that for those places, we will have inspectors of the Department of Environment, Ecology look at doing audits. If there is contamination over a particular percentage, and the department will determine that in their regulations, the Department of Environment now can impose fines on a daily basis of over $1,000. The offenders have the opportunity within 45 days to come up with a plan, and that plan can include hiring what we're calling a zero waste facilitator. That zero waste facilitator will be the on-site person that will be responsible could be a multitude of people, to getting and going through the trash. We have that already in many places. The Ferry Building, for those who go to the Giants ball games, they have sorters on site. There's places in our environment right now in our city that are wonderful, wonderful participants, and they produce very, very little waste at all. So this is asking that in those instances where there is an opportunity, they have an opportunity to correct where there is contamination, and during the time of the fines, come up with a plan for working with the Department of Environment and others to hire a zero waste facilitator. And we believe that this is going to be an aggressive way to get us to much further diversion and protecting our environment. In the coming weeks, we're going to have another piece of legislation that dealt with another area of waste, and that's our construction and demolition. But that I will hold for later. The rest I submit.
Thank you,
very much.
Supervisor Safai. We'll return to Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon. Many of you know I represent a food district. And for those of you that don't know, by definition, a food district is a section of town where a grocery store doesn't exist, and just access to healthy food is just non-existent. This is a definition that is also widely used by the federal government. And with that, I'm concerned with the difficulty to get viable food, to get viable and good service, service grocery store in certain parts of not only my district, but parts of the city. And I'm thinking about the Tenderloin, I'm thinking about the south of Market area where you really need access to healthy foods. I'd like to ask I would like to direct the department heads over at OEWD to review and to assess all possible solutions to this particular problem and look at both attraction and retention models, including but not limited to tax and hiring credits and other rebate programs in neighborhoods currently underserved in our city. Overall, my goal is to create sustainable grocery stores rooted in the community. I'm asking the OEWD to assess different types of grocery store models that can support bringing healthy foods to low-income residents and underserved, and also nutrition-poor areas where people have no or extremely limited access to low-cost and healthy foods. Madam Clerk, the rest I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Sheehy.
Thank you. I have an in memoriam for Paolo Caltagirone. Paolo Caltagirone, a longtime resident of San Francisco, passed away peacefully on May 28, 2018. Paolo was the father of 4 sons, including Gaetano, who is the current captain of Mission Police Station. Mr. Caltagirone was born in 1930 in Caltanissetta, Sicily, fell in love with his wife Pina, and together they immigrated to the United States in search of a better life. They raised a family here in San Francisco's North Beach, and Paolo became an executive in the meat and produce industry. He enjoyed taking his extended family to Cobb Mountain on the weekends, where he joined many of his old North Beach friends at the Italian Village Country Club. The rest I'd like to submit.
Thank you, Supervisor. And Supervisor Stephanie.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, today I'm introducing an in memoriam for Geraldine Washburn, known as Miss Washburn, to generations of folk dancing students throughout the Bay Area. Miss Washburn taught for over 63 years at St. Brendan's School and will be fondly remembered by all her students and colleagues. St. Brendan's and the teaching community of San Francisco lost a dear friend and educator. She's survived by her two nieces, Cheryl and Geraldine, and her great-nephew, Ian. Ms. Washburn passed away on May 17th, and she will be sadly missed. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor. And Madam President, seeing no other names on the roster, that concludes the introduction of new business.
Okay, Madam Clerk, please read public comment.
At this time, the public may address the entire Board of Supervisors for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board, to include the May 8th, 2018 Board meeting minutes and items 14 through 20 on the adoption without reference to committee calendar. Public comment is not allowed on an item that has been previously subject to public comment at a Board committee, and pursuant to the Board's rules, please direct your remarks to the Board as a whole and not to individual supervisors and not to the audience. Speakers using interpretation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify. If you would like to display a document on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and then remove the document when you'd like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting. First speaker, please.
أيها الإخوة العرب، أيا كان رمضان كريم. يوم الخميس بيكون آخر يوم إن شاء الله لرمضان، ويوم الجمعة بيكون يوم العيد. كل سنة وانتم طيبين، تقدروا تهيصوا وتزقططوا مع بداية العيد. ربنا يسعدكم ويسعد أولادكم. أيها الإخوة العرب، وجه وقت الاختبار. اختبارنا للمير المحافظ بتاع السيتي الجديد. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, my name Abdullah Mujahid. I spent 33 years as community activist and homeless advocate. Today, I try to find out which one who going to be our new mayor, London or Leno. Any one of them going to win. I have no complaint. I have no anything against any one of them. I love both of them, and as you see, I know Leno, I know Gavin Newsom over 25 years, and I wish to see them hearing for me. The city doesn't need any problem for the homeless, need to resolve the problem for the homeless, need housing, need work. And if we have housing, we have no problem, we have no people sleep in the street or the corner of the bridge. Try to study and try to get my message. One mayor in the city is not enough. I said that before and I repeat until I am die. We need assistant mayor. Assistant mayor work very hard like anyone else. Number one, you put it in the shoulder, manager and worker. I am eyewitness. I see the worker, I see the manager. When they steal the turkey, I bring it for them. They steal box of the food. They steal the donation coming to the homeless for themselves. That is very good work for our assistant mayor. Try to understand, we need that, and we need to stop anyone to take advantage from the homeless and steal anything belonging to them. Mark and London, one of you must hear for what I said.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. And next speaker, please.
Thank you, Ms. Corvillo. My name is Winship Hillier, involuntary psychiatric outpatient in the city for over 10 years. I'd like to read to you an article written by Stephen Schwartz and Kathy Costanzo, a professor of law and a lawyer. Compelling treatment in the community, distorted doctrines, and violated values. This is in respect to citywide case management community focus, which you fund at a rate of well over $1 million a week in this city. This was published in Volume 20 of Loyola of Los Angeles Law Review, pages 1329 and 1384. Its proponents candidly admit that coerced community care is designed to, quote, abrogate the rights of people to refuse treatment. Its effectiveness depends upon being able to compel those who resist psychiatric interventions, usually psychotropic medication, to follow a prescribed regimen of care. The individual's capacity to appreciate the options is irrelevant. I mention this because this is basically denying people their constitutional rights, and you have to make a decision whether we are going to be governed in this city by laws or by doctors. I would have you note that even doctors among themselves cannot agree upon who is sick and who is not, and so sociologists have proven that even among major diagnostic axes, psychosis versus personality disorder, that the social distance between the patient and the doctor is a considerable factor in how the person is diagnosed with psychosis or not. Madam Clerk.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Honorable Supervisors. My name is Nelson Lum. I'm the Area 2 Vice Commander of the American Legion Department of California. I'm also locally the commander of American Legion Cathay Post 384. Cathay Post 384 was formed in 1931 as an exclusively Chinese American veterans post due to climate of discrimination at the time. Chinese American veterans were not welcomed to join the posts that were in existence at that time. With that as our history, we see the recognition of those who served in World War II, and I'm talking about the Chinese American veterans who served. They should be recognized, and there is currently an item on your agenda, item number 17, that would encourage our congressional leaders to pass a congressional bill that will award the World War II Chinese American veterans a gold medal. About 18 months ago, members of Cathay Post introduced a resolution to support the gold medal award for World War II Chinese American veterans. That resolution has since gone all the way up to the American Legion at the national level. And then at the national level, the American Legion has voted in support of such award. I'm here to urge you to approve the resolution that's before you on item number 17, because it is supported by veterans, especially veterans of Chinese American descent. Those Chinese American who served in World War II served while being discriminated against. Therefore, your vote to support the award of gold medal to the few remaining Chinese American veterans of World War II is appreciated, and please remember they earned it. Thank you.
Thank you for your service, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Supervisors and Supervisor President London Breed. My name is Raymond Wong. I'm a U.S. Navy retired Chief Petty Officer served in Vietnam. I come before you to respectfully ask for support of item 17, and that's to support and honor the Chinese American World War II veterans with a Congressional Gold Medal. Many of the Chinese American who served during World War II was not granted citizenship rights, but yet they faithfully serve our country. I like to cite, as a Navy veteran, I like to cite the highest ranking naval officer, Chinese American, who served during World War II, and that is retired Admiral Gordon Chung-hoon. While he was serving in World War II, he was a commander of a U.S. Navy destroyer engaged in battle in Okinawa. His ship was severely damaged with over 20 fatalities. Battle Group Admiral advised him that if his ship is in danger of sinking, they should abandon ship. He said no, he's going to continue fighting. He had his crew fighting. He had another group of his crew to do damage control in order to keep the ship afloat. As a result of that, after the war, he was advanced to admiral, and he was one of the highest recognized Chinese American serving for our country. In fact, he was the first ranking flag officer of Chinese American descent. So I'd like to ask again for your support of this request for a Congressional Gold Medal. Thank you.
Thank you for your service, sir, and for your comments. Next speaker, please.
My name is Sherman Tang. I'm with the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. We spearhead the legislation pending in Congress right now concerning providing a Congressional Gold Medal to all the World War II Chinese American servicemen. They serve our country since World War II. I think they began serving in the Civil War. So it's a long history of serving our country for freedom, but they have not been recognized since then due to discrimination. We urge this board to support the resolution to urging Congress to pass legislation so that they can receive the award appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Next speaker, please.
Members of the board, my name is Roger Brandon, and I wanted to comment upon some of these record high costs that you were proposing to have the city spend. Oh, I see. There are 5 or 6 items with proposed public work cost of $200 million, $340 million, $478 million. All of these are astonishingly high costs. The people of San Francisco did not show much interest in voting for these in the recent election. Okay, and I think that some people show an interest in leading the city into a municipal bankruptcy, and it's not a step that we need to take. And so I'm objecting to this. There's a unusual item here, item 3 on today's agenda. Proceeds from revenue bonds, state loans or grants, wastewater revenues, whatever that might be.
I'm pausing your time.
And capacity fees.
Sir, I'm pausing your time.
$1.2 billion. This seems to be a mistake.
Sir, I am pausing your time. That item has already had public comment in committee, so it is not eligible to be discussed today during public comment.
Well, I appreciate this brief opportunity to object to this type of a massive expenditure, which I think leads the city into a municipal bankruptcy. It's a step we don't need to take.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Members of the board, my name is Hubert Lee. I'm here in reference of item number 17, and I am also here to express my support for honoring the Chinese American of World War II veterans. Would like your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Last night, I saw the most amazing movie in the world, The Search for the Real Mount Sinai by Bob Cornucci and Larry Williams. This is the greatest discovery in the millennium. These guys snuck up there. Okay, it's in Saudi Arabia. They took these, it's burnt black. The rocks are melted. Bob cracked the rock. It's granite inside. They found 12 springs of water. They found the rock that cracked when Moses struck it and the water came out, and the Muslims are hiding it. This would make them millions of dollars, maybe a day, in tourism. It's amazing, but get your copy. All right, last time I was here, I can't remember if I told you or the board in San Jose a very interesting story how I was praying, and God led me to the very house of this lady who has some sort of homosexual sign. Hate has no home here. There it is. Hate has no home here. And that's amazing. But there's 2 things in my life that were amazing. That and about 20 years ago, I was out praying. I had read how many words Elijah had said, as recorded. And I remember I had this green flannel shirt, no lie, wrapped around my head, because I remember Elijah when he was up on the mountain in the cave praying, and he wrapped his head in the mantle, and God told him to, what are you doing here, really? He wimped out. He was afraid of Jezebel, and he ran away. And he said, what are you doing here, Elijah? But still, because he was saved by grace, God used him, and he said, look, I want you to anoint Jehu king over Israel, and I want you to anoint Elisha in your room, and this bird landed on my head. No lie, and it was scared the bird as much as me, and it squawked and it flew out before I could find what type of bird it was. But I'm here to testify. I know it sounds crazy, but if you know when Jesus was anointed, the year on our calendar, you can calculate the sixth trumpet. 9/11 was the sixth trumpet. I made this prediction 30 days before it happened. I think I know what I'm talking about.
Thank you for your comments.
I think about it.
Next speaker, please.
Jesus is real.
Supervisors, my name is Richard Lau. I came to America when I was 10 years old. That's 1940. And at that time, the draft was going on. And at that time, I was only 10 years old. 10 years later, when the outbreak of the Korean War, I was drafted. But I want to tell you that I was going to school, and I played in the playgrounds. And at that time, we had lots of young Chinese Americans. They are going to school, and they are being drafted. And some of them, after the training, they come back in uniform, and how happy they are to serve our country. That's 1940 and 41. And one of the reasons is that at that time, they are getting $21 per month. But lots of my people working in Chinatown, in the laundries and in the grocery stores, they were making $30 a month. So, you know, they have lots of money to spend. I just want to tell you that Chinese American in the teenagers and how happy they are to join the American Army, and they did a good service. I want to tell something about myself. I don't have time now. Thank you. Thank you. Huh? Okay. I was drafted and trained in the Fort Lord for 4 months, and then end up in Fort Mason and shipped to Japan. 20 days after, I was end up in the front line in Korea. After 1 year, I got on a ship from Incheon, come back to Fort Mason.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm appearing here today because there are 3 or 4 parks. One of them is now in Santa Carlos, one of them is in San Francisco, and the Warriors are getting ready to open. And we've had a meeting with the Warriors, and none of these stadiums have an operator that is black. One of the things you have to understand, all of the players that are of any value are black players. Now, today, there are no black people that own one hot dog stand. And I'm asking the Board of Supervisors, you know, it's very difficult for y'all maybe to understand. They lump everybody as a minority. My ancestors were slaves in this country. And you have to understand, a lot of people call me and talk to me and ask me, why don't you go down to the Board of Supervisors and ask them what can they do so a black person can own one of these concessions. So I'm here today to ask you, would you look into the fact that not one black person have a concession in none of these parks, the one in San Carlos, the one in San Francisco, and now we will have 2. And the people with the Warriors said that they didn't think that that was important, but we think differently. And we don't see no movement insofar as black people own one of these concessions in one of these parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any other members of the public who would like to address the Board of Supervisors after this last speaker? Please step over to your right.
Tom Gilberti. Before we leave 50 years ago, I was reading The Brothers by David Talbert, and I've recommended his other book, The Devil's Chessboard. We're lucky to have him as an author. This same cover was on Sunday morning, CBS, and they used the photograph. And when Jane Pauley was talking about the book, not the book, she was saying some authors have tried to mythologize, or whatever that, mythize the Kennedys. I thought both books, this and The Devil's Chessboard, were very intelligent, very well written, very objective. If you want a good history of what this world was happening at that time, a little segment of it, it's a good summer read. This is Bobby Kennedy when he was running for the Senate after his brother was killed. We cannot expect an African to believe we are on the side of equality and human dignity when his own ambassadors are not served in our restaurants. We cannot expect countries with far lower standards of living to respect our belief in human dignity if their aged are venerated and ours are neglected. We cannot expect nations to join us in combating poverty if in the midst of unprecedented wealth, 6 million families live in poverty in our country. This was in the 60s. And there's a whole lot of other tidbits to go with it. It's a good read. The country is being taken over, not by assassinations, but by gerrymandering, by suppression of voters. That's an assassination. In itself, we have to recognize that our democracy needs to be protected. We need to protect our democracy here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. And Madam President, I will yield the floor back to you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. And now we will go to our 2:30 special commendations, and I will turn the floor over to Supervisor Norman Yee.
Thank you, President Bree. Not too long ago, I started paying attention to our veterans of World War II, and then I introduced a resolution that will be heard today. And during that process, I wanted to highlight as much as I could and had a press conference to talk about it today. And during this process, I wasn't sure if I would be able to locate or have any of these veterans from World War II come to this press conference because of their age, and I just didn't know any of them personally, except for my father-in-law, who wouldn't be able to come because of his immobility. And I was told that one of them was going to be there, and he did show up. But to our delight, this morning or this afternoon, there were actually 3 of the World War II veterans that are Chinese Americans that actually showed up, were able to come. They're all in their 90s, and I would love for them. Oh, they are seated right up here in the front. And their names are Alan Yu, Ronald Wong, and Dale King. They served in different services of the military, from the Navy to the Army to the Air Force. And one of the ones that, and I might have talked about this before, one of the squadrons was the Tigers, or the Flying Tigers, as they're sometimes known. And within the Flying Tigers, there were many of the companies that were of single ethnic group, mainly Chinese Americans. And that's something that people didn't know. I mean, Chinese Americans, 13,000 of them actually served in World War II, and there were only 120,000 Chinese Americans living in the United States. So the 13,000 actually represented 25% of the male adult population, and they were serving on the war. So my father-in-law was part of this, and also Alan Yu was part of the Flying Tiger. And so what I'd like to do is, I think they could do their own talking, and I'm just honored that they're here and can make it. First, I'll just call them up, and if you'd like to say a word or two, and I'm sure that my colleagues here will be very patient with you. And Alan, you come up first, Dale King second, and Ronald Wan, you come in third. Okay, Alan? Alan. So if we have a little patience with him.
He's tired.
He's tired. So Alan, thank you very much for being here. Oh. Then if Dale King, would you like to come up and say a few words? Go ahead. So they have a combined age of 280, these three people.
Honorable Supervisors, I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm excited to be here today. I urge the Supervisor to pass the resolutions to urge the Congress to recognize the Chinese who had fought in World War II. They have recognized the Japanese, they have recognized the Filipino. It's time to recognize the Chinese. Thank you.
Is Colonel Ronald Wan here? Colonel?
President Breed, members of the Board of Supervisors, my name is Ronald Wan. I just turned 93 years old. I believe I was the only one that served in the Navy, the Marines, the Army, and the Air Force. I had a total of 34 years in the military, and I'm proud. And I urge the board to help pass this resolution to recognizing that Chinese Americans served World War II. Thank you.
You can see that they're very unselfish. This moment is about you three. The Board of Supervisors want to honor you with a certificate of honor, so thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Supervisor, make a picture for all.
Like this, guys.
Supervisor, if you come.
Thank you to all the veterans who are here today and in honor of the 3 Chinese American veterans that we have who have served our country with pride and distinction. We appreciate your service, and we are grateful to have you here in the chambers today. And with that, we are done with our commendations, and we can go to the items that I know you are very anxious to hear about. Madam Clerk, please call the items for adoption without reference to committee.
Items 14 through 20 are being considered for adoption without committee reference. An item may be severed and considered separately.
Supervisor Stephanie.
I'd like to sever item 14, please.
Okay, Supervisor Tang.
Sever item 16.
Supervisor Yi.
Sever item 17.
Okay, and on the remaining items, colleagues, can we take those same house, same call? Without objection, those items are adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call item number 14.
Item 14 is a resolution to declare support for California State Senate Bill number 1186, the Stop Secret Surveillance Act, authored by Senator Jerry Hill, requiring law enforcement agencies to hold public hearings and generate surveillance use policies governing the information collected by surveillance technology.
Supervisor Stephanie.
Thank you, President Breed. Colleagues, today I'm going to be voting no on this measure, although I absolutely understand and support the intent behind this bill and, of course, the resolution. Our Special Investigations Unit in our police department is a plainclothes unit that arrests high-profile suspects by the use of the technologies mentioned in this bill, and I do fear that publishing their names allows suspects to know their identities and poses an officer safety issue. I also worry that publishing the types of technologies we have allows suspects to avoid being apprehended. SB 1186 is meant to curb law enforcement from storing data and using it or disseminating it in a manner that invades people's privacy, something I actually agree with, but I do have concerns with the methods being proposed in this bill, and I can't support it at this time. And one thing, I just looked at the Senate analyses that was done at the state level, and I didn't realize that both the California District Attorneys Association and the California Public Defenders Association are in opposition, and that opposition was verified on May 25th. So as a former prosecutor, when I see public defenders and DAs agreeing on things, that makes me very nervous as well. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to support this resolution at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Stephanie. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 1186 actually evolved from existing laws passed over the last couple of years in Oakland and Santa Clara, which municipalities have required law enforcement agencies to adopt surveillance use policies prior to the use of surveillance technology, containing the following categories of information: the purpose of the surveillance technology, the types of information collected by the surveillance technology, the categories of individuals who can access or use that information, what safeguards exist to protect information from unauthorized access, the time period for which the data is retained, if and how members of the public can access information, how third-party law enforcement agencies, state or federal, may have access to that information, how law enforcement personnel are trained in using the technology, and what mechanisms exist to provide oversight for the use of surveillance technology. This is fundamentally about the democratization and having elected decision makers oversee these technologies. State Senate Bill 1186 is really about trust in our law enforcement agency, and it expressly recognizes the balance between law enforcement's role in enhancing public safety and reasonable safeguards for how our residents' civil liberties and privacy are protected. Yesterday, we all received a letter from the San Francisco Police Officers Association, which expressed concern that Senate Bill 1186 would force the disclosure of the identities of undercover officers accessing surveillance technologies, paired with the frankly hyperbolic threat that this would result in officers being assaulted or killed by suspects. It would not. My staff, Lee Hepner, has spoken with Senator Hill's staff, who's working this bill, and confirmed it is not the author's intent to require public disclosure of individual names of personnel who would have access to potentially sensitive information. It is also not how this policy is implemented in Oakland or Santa Clara, where they specifically make sure that that information remains confidential. The POA also states that this policy would, quote, destroy the usefulness of technologies in finding suspects or deterring crime, arguing that holding hearings on surveillance technologies, quote, defeats the purpose of having the technology in the first place. On this, I fundamentally disagree with the notion that public safety is predicated on the secret mass surveillance of members of the public. This pattern of mass surveillance too often results in the targeting and harassment of minority communities, political dissidents, protesters and advocates, and people of other marginalized communities who are not engaged in any unlawful behavior. A few weeks back, I introduced a charter amendment, and I want to again thank the 5 co-sponsors for the November ballot, which advances the government's role in informing members of the public how information about them may be collected or used, and to provide public forums for members of the public to opine on how data about them may be collected and used going forward. We have a duty to protect members of the public, and that duty includes protecting members of the public from unwarranted intrusions into their private lives. And in that spirit, I hope, colleagues, that you can join me in supporting State Senate Bill 1186. And I do want to just share with you that these policies are actually, we looked at Santa Clara's policies. They're actually just 3 pages long. They're common sense policies, but this is, I think, really puts these kind of technologies and the implementation of them in the hands of individuals who are accountable to the electorate. It makes things more transparent, and I think increases people's respect for and confidence in law enforcement, and I ask respectfully for your support.
Thank you. Seeing no other names on the roster, Madam Clerk, on the item, please call the roll.
On item 14, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yi, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye. Please
Cohen.
add me.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer.
Aye.
Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Sheehy. Sheehy, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, no. There are 10 ayes and 1 no, with Supervisor Stephanie in the dissent.
The resolution is adopted. Madam Clerk, please call item number 16.
Item 16 is a resolution to denounce President Trump and the United States Department of Health and Human Services for proposing to prohibit federal Title X funding for federally funded clinics that provide abortions or abortion-related services, to affirm San Francisco's commitment to protect and maintain an individual's choice to receive access to critical women's health services.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you, and I want to thank all of my female colleagues, as well as I know Supervisor Yi's a co-sponsor. I welcome any others as well, and Supervisor Safai in joining us today in denouncing the federal government's proposed rule changes to federal funding that helps with family planning. Today we're joined by Planned Parenthood and many other city departments and staff and people who support a woman's right to choose. And we did this because on June 2nd, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services actually proposed a rule change that would prohibit federal Title X family planning program funding for agencies that provide abortions or abortion-related services. I think that I can speak for all of the members of the board that we all believe in a woman's right to choose and to access information that can help them make safe choices that are appropriate for their personal situation. And so we really need everyone to weigh in by July 31st of this year, which is when the comment period ends. We'd like everyone to visit the Office of the Federal Registrar's website, which we have shared with the public through social media and with the press, and we hope that, and sorry, it's too long for me to state here, but I would really encourage everyone to comment because the government is supposed to actually respond to all comments again by July 31st. So again, I want to thank all my colleagues here on the board. We're just so lucky to be here in San Francisco where we can actually stand in solidarity on this issue, and hopefully we will not see a reversal of women's rights and dialing us back to generations past when a woman didn't have a right to choose what to do with her body. So thank you to colleagues.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Seeing no other names on the roster, Madam Clerk, on the item, please call the roll.
On item 16, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yi.
Aye.
Yi, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Sheehy. Sheehy, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, aye. There are 11 ayes.
The item is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, let's go to item number 17.
Item 17 is a resolution to call on the United States Congress to award Chinese American World War II veterans with the Congressional Gold Medal.
Supervisor Yee.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I know you've heard quite a bit of this already today, so I'll keep it short. As I mentioned, there were 13,000 Chinese Americans that served in all the branches of the military during World War II. And one of the things that most people didn't know is that 40% of them actually were Chinese Americans that were not native born and were not able to fully naturalize until after the war ended because of the Chinese Exclusion Act that was still in effect during that time. The bills that I'm talking about are H.R. 2358, introduced by Representative Ed Royce, and co-sponsored by our own Representative Jackie Spear. And the Senate Bill 1050 was introduced by Senator Tommy Duckworth last May. It's been sitting in their committees, prospective committees, and we really want to urge them to move this on because so many of our veterans are basically disappearing from World War II. And as you see, the three that came today earlier, they were all in their 90s, and I'm just fortunate that they were able to come. Again, this is to urge the Congress to actually honor our veterans that were Chinese Americans with the Congressional Gold Medal. And so I want to thank Congresswoman Jackie Spear for not only sending her staff to the press conference, but actually sending a letter to us urging us to pass this. I think you all received a copy of this. And she said that we've been in contact with her office. If it doesn't move forward this year, she's going to take this legislation and be the primary sponsor next time. Hopefully there won't be a next time. So I want to also thank my colleagues who on the board for co-sponsoring, Supervisors Tang, Fewer, Kim, and Cohen. I hope I have your support.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I would be honored to be listed as a co-sponsor, and second, my neighbor and longtime North Beach resident, who many of you know, Teresa Flandrick, asked that I invoke the name of Eddie Fung, who was Teresa's neighbor for over 30 years when she lived on Lombard Street before she got Ellis Act evicted. And Eddie was known by another neighbor of hers from Waverly Place in Chinatown as the only kid in school who wore red cowboy boots and continued to be a beloved character in the neighborhood. And he's featured in a documentary that captures the experience of World War II veterans called The War Then and Now, which our own Chronicle reporter, Carl Nolte, had this to say about in 2007. Eddie Fung, born and raised in San Francisco's Chinatown, was captured by the Japanese and worked as a slave laborer on the infamous Burma-Thailand Death Railway. The experience taught him what it was to be a man and what it was to be proud to be Chinese. Eddie had the distinction of being the only Chinese-American soldier to be captured by the Japanese during World War II, and then he was put to work on that railroad project where over 12,000 POWs and 70,000 Asian lives were lost. Eddie lived to tell how his background helped him endure 42 months of humiliation and cruelty, and how his experience as the sole Chinese-American member of the most decorated Texan unit of any war shaped his later life. So thank you, Teresa, for teaching me and allowing me to teach everybody about Eddie's life and involvement as a proud Chinese-American soldier in World War II.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge Supervisor Norman Yee for his leadership in bringing this before us. Last year, I had the honor of participating and congratulating our Filipino World War II veterans when they received their Congressional Gold Medal. It was really touching and moving to see our senior veterans
finally honored for their valor and heroism after decades of their heroism being denied by our history books. And I just want to thank Supervisor Norman Yee for bringing in one of the final steps of this recognition, which is acknowledging our Chinese-American World War II veterans. I did not know until this resolution came before us that Chinese Americans have fought in every American war since the Civil War. And these are the parts of our history that we often don't get to learn about. And yet these Chinese and Chinese Americans fought in a war for a country that denied them citizenship, that denied their ability to immigrate the rest of their family to this country despite the work that they had done, had denied their ability to own land in the state of California, had denied really so many different rights and values and principles that we take for granted today. And on this board, despite being an Asian American Studies major in college, I have learned so much about the contributions of Chinese and Asian Americans to the history of our city and our country. And even just over the last few months, Supervisor Norman Yee, I think, has brought to light some of the shameful aspects of San Francisco history, whether it is around the renaming of Julius Kahn Playground or the renaming of James Phelan Way. It is incredibly important for us to acknowledge not just the communities that are here, but the long-term contributions that all of our communities have made, and also the racism, hatred, and terror that they endured under this city's leadership. And this, the past 3 resolutions that Supervisor Norman Yee, I think, has been an incredibly important step forward in educating our community and also remembering our history, which is so important to do, and not taking for granted how far we have all come together. So I'm happy to support this, happy to be a co-sponsor, and I strongly urge the U.S. Congress to move expeditiously to pass the bill to grant the Congressional Gold Medal to these veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Ronan.
Excuse me, thank you so much. I too would be honored to be a co-sponsor, and I just wanted to thank Supervisor Yee for bringing this forward and educating us about this incredibly important history of our country. And also, if you could send a personal thank you to your father on my behalf, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Ronan. Supervisor Safai.
I too also would be honored to be added as a co-sponsor of this, and I know that this is very emotional for you, Supervisor Yee, and I really truly appreciate your leadership on this and honoring people that have given their life in many regards and their service and their time and so much of dedicating everything that they're about to this country. My grandfather was a World War II veteran, and he was so important in my rearing and an important part of my life. So it's really important that everyone that was involved in contributing to the greatness of this country and the sacrifices that they made are honored. So thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you, Supervisor Safai. Supervisor Sheehy.
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor as well. Thank you for your leadership, Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, Supervisor Sheehy. Supervisor Stephanie.
I want to reiterate what my colleagues are saying here today to express my thanks for Supervisor Yee's leadership on this and the very moving tribute we just witnessed, and I also would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Supervisor Stephanie. And Supervisor Yee, again, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for honoring those amazing veterans who were here in the chamber today. And my grandfather served in the Army as well, and I am just grateful for the service of many of the folks in our military, and they should all be recognized and not forgotten. And so we truly appreciate your tribute here today, and please add me as a co-sponsor as well. And with that, I see no other names on the roster. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, please read the in memoriams.
Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. On behalf of Supervisor Peskin, for the late Mr. Yok Jun Lau. On behalf of Supervisor Sheehy, for the late Mr. Paolo Caltagirone. And on behalf of Supervisor Stephanie, for the late Miss Geraldine Washburn.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, is there any further business before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
Okay, we want to say congratulations to the Warriors, and although we couldn't be there today at the parade, we are there in spirit. Go Warriors. Looking forward to a great season next year again. And with that, colleagues, we are adjourned.